Right now, if somebody stopped you on the street and asked, "Are you lower class, middle class, or upper class?" most people would answer instantly. They'd say, "I make good money. I live in a decent area. I drive a nice car." But money has a strange way of playing tricks on people, because sometimes your lifestyle goes up while your wealth stays stuck. Sometimes your paycheck gets bigger while your future gets smaller.
And that's where things get dangerous, because you can feel rich, dress rich, look rich, even sound rich, while the actual math quietly says something completely different. And the scary part? Millions of people never realize it. They keep climbing a ladder only to discover they leaned it against the wrong wall.
Today, we're exposing the real wealth ladder in America. Not the Instagram version, not the fake flex version, the actual numbers. And we're following one person's financial life through the entire journey. Because by the end of this video, you might realize you're standing in a completely different place than you thought.
And before we start, do one thing. Subscribe and hit like, because understanding money is expensive, but learning from other people's mistakes is free.
Let's start with the biggest financial lie almost everybody believes. Income equals wealth. Sounds logical, right? You earn more money, you become wealthier. Simple. Except reality doesn't work that way. I've seen people making $50,000 quietly build serious wealth, while people earning $250,000 stay trapped for decades. Because income is what comes in, wealth is what stays. Big difference.
Think about two people. Marcus earns $90,000 a year. Emma earns $160,000. Most people instantly assume Emma is wealthier. But Marcus owns investments. Marcus has retirement accounts growing. Marcus has almost no debt. Emma? Luxury apartment, car payments, credit cards, designer lifestyle, vacation financed on payments. Marcus looks average. Emma looks successful. But appearances don't pay bills. Numbers do.
Money doesn't care about feelings. Money doesn't care about status. Money doesn't care about what car is sitting in your driveway. Money follows math, and math only asks one question. What do you actually own after subtracting what you owe? That number has a name, net worth. And this single number changes everything.
So let's follow somebody realistic, not some billionaire, not somebody who sold a startup at 23, just a normal guy. His name is Ethan. He's 33 years old, works as a project coordinator, makes about $88,000 per year, lives in a decent apartment, has a nice car, contributes a little to retirement. Nothing crazy, nothing terrible, pretty normal.
After taxes, Ethan brings home around $5,300 every month. Rent, $1,700. Car payment, $420. Student loan, $310. Utilities, food, subscriptions, life happens. And if you asked Ethan where he stands financially, he'd probably say, "I'm doing all right." Maybe even, "I'm solid middle class." And honestly, most people watching right now would probably agree.
Because from the outside, Ethan's life looks stable. Job? Check. Car? Check. Apartment? Check. Income? Check. But here's the thing. Money problems rarely show up outside. They hide inside the math. And once we start opening the numbers, everything changes.
Let's calculate Ethan's real position. Assets first. Car value, $24,000. Retirement account, $14,000. Savings, $4,000. Small investment account, $2,000. Total assets, $44,000. Looks decent so far. Now, let's look at debt.
Car loan balance, $19,000. Student loans, $29,000. Credit card balance, $6,000. Total debt, $54,000. So now comes the moment nobody likes. Assets minus liabilities. $44,000 minus $54,000. Ethan's net worth, negative $10,000. Negative, not positive, negative.
And this is exactly where people freeze, because Ethan doesn't feel broke. He isn't struggling to eat. He isn't unemployed. He isn't sleeping in his car. But mathematically, he's underwater. And millions of Americans are standing in exactly the same place. Good salary, normal life, negative wealth.
Now, here's where people completely misunderstand this category. When people hear bottom wealth group, they imagine minimum wage jobs, no education, no opportunities, no future. But reality looks very different. This group is full of teachers, nurses, office workers, managers, people making 70,000, 80,000, sometimes even six figures.
Because the trap isn't low income. The trap is invisible. Money comes in, money goes out. Month after month, year after year. You get a raise, expenses rise. You upgrade your car, payments rise. You move somewhere nicer, rent rises. You feel progress, but the wealth needle barely moves. That's why lifestyle inflation is dangerous, because sometimes success gets louder while wealth stays silent.
And Ethan doesn't have a spending problem. That's important. He has a structure problem. No meaningful investments, no home equity, debt growing faster than assets. He's running hard, but he's running on a treadmill. Movement without distance, effort without escape.
And now the real question begins. How far is Ethan from climbing out? Because the gap isn't as big as most people think, but the next numbers might completely change how you see money. So Ethan is sitting at negative $10,000. Now, most people hear a negative number and immediately think, okay, I'm doomed. But that's not what the math says. Because here's something interesting. The hardest part of wealth building isn't becoming rich, it's crossing zero. Seriously, going from negative 10,000 to positive 20,000 often feels harder than going from 200,000 to 500,000. Because in the beginning, every dollar is fighting against debt.
Think of it like climbing out of a hole. If you're standing at the bottom, you aren't climbing upward yet. You're first climbing back to ground level. And that's exactly where Ethan is. Right now, he's not building wealth. He's removing pressure, which matters because pressure quietly destroys financial progress. Let's give Ethan an actual plan, not some wake up at 5 a.m., manifest abundance, become a millionaire in 6 months. Real numbers, real life. Ethan reviews his spending and finds something surprising. Streaming services, random online purchases, eating out constantly. Small things, nothing looked dangerous alone, but together about $650 every month.
Now, notice something important. The problem wasn't coffee. People love blaming coffee. It wasn't coffee. It was unconscious spending. Tiny leaks sink big ships. So Ethan takes that $650, puts $450 towards student loans, $200 into investments. Nothing dramatic, no suffering, no living in darkness, eating instant noodles, just intentional movement. Fast forward 3 years, something strange starts happening. Ethan's debt drops faster than expected. Student loan balances shrink, interest charges get smaller, stress levels go down, and for the first time, his money starts moving in 2 directions: less debt, more assets. That's when financial momentum appears, and momentum changes behavior.
Because money isn't only math, it's psychology. People think wealthy people wake up motivated every day. Most don't. What they have is momentum. When you finally see progress, saving stops feeling painful. Investing stops feeling confusing. You stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, will this move me forward? That question changes lives. So after several years, Ethan finally reaches positive $30,000 net worth. Congratulations, he's crossed the first line. Technically, he just entered lower middle wealth territory. Sounds exciting, right? Well, yes and no, because this stage creates a completely different illusion.
People think, I made it. But many households here are still fragile. Let's look at a typical example. House worth, $320,000. Mortgage remaining, $255,000. Retirement savings, $18,000. Emergency savings, $10,000. Car loan, $12,000. Net worth looks decent, maybe around $80,000. But here's the problem. Most of that wealth is trapped. It's sitting inside walls. This is where people start becoming what many call house rich. On paper, things look amazing. Real life? Not always. Because imagine having $120,000 in home equity while your checking account has $2,000. Looks good on spreadsheets, feels terrible during emergencies.
Because your house cannot buy groceries tomorrow. Your house cannot pay unexpected medical bills next week. Your house cannot help if you suddenly lose your job, unless you borrow against it or sell it, which means your safety can become an illusion. And this is where people start understanding something powerful. Net worth matters, but liquidity matters too. Because being wealthy on paper and being financially secure are not always the same thing.
And things get really interesting from here because the next stage is where people stop building wealth accidentally and start building it intentionally. And that's where the game completely changes. Remember to like and subscribe because the next video gets much bigger. From here, compound growth starts entering the story, and compound growth changes everything.
Something important starts happening around this stage, and most people don't even notice it. Below this point, people usually build wealth by accident. Seriously, they buy a house, pay monthly bills, a little equity builds over time, some retirement money grows quietly, and wealth slowly appears in the background. But here, the game changes, because now you're no longer drifting, now you're steering.
This is where intentional wealth begins. You stop simply participating in the system and start using the system. Because below this level, most people ask, how much can I spend? But above this level, people begin asking, how much can I keep? Small difference, massive outcome. Now Ethan notices something strange. The first years felt painfully slow, like pushing a car uphill. Every month felt like effort. Every extra payment felt tiny. Every investment felt insignificant. And mentally, that's where people quit, because progress at the beginning looks boring.
Let's be honest, nobody gets excited watching their investment account grow from $4,000 to $4,320. No fireworks, no dramatic music, no millionaire feeling. But hidden beneath those boring numbers, something dangerous is growing. Momentum. And momentum doesn't look impressive until suddenly it does. Now fast forward a little more. Ethan reaches around $120,000 invested, and suddenly the math starts behaving differently. Let's say his portfolio earns around 7%. That means roughly $8,400 growth in 1 year, without additional work, without extra hours, without asking his boss for a raise, just math.
Read that again mentally. Over $8,000 generated without Ethan physically working for it. Now compare that to earlier years. Back then, he fought for every dollar. Now, money is beginning to fight beside him. And eventually, money starts fighting harder than he does. That's when people realize compound growth isn't magic, it's delayed power. Here's the painful part. Many people never reach this stage, not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, not because they don't work hard. They simply interrupt the process. They restart over and over.
Think about it. Someone starts investing, gets nervous, stops, starts again 6 months later, stops again, takes money out, changes plans, follows trends, chases quick money, and every restart quietly destroys time. Because wealth building isn't only about dollars, it's about uninterrupted years, and compound growth hates interruptions. Fast forward again. Ethan is now in his late 40s. His investments continue growing. Retirement accounts are larger. Debt is mostly gone. Home equity has increased, and his total net worth approaches $500,000. Now understand something important. Ethan doesn't feel rich. Actually, most people at this stage don't. Because wealth behaves strangely. When you're broke, you imagine $500,000 feels like winning the lottery. Then you get there, and life still feels normal. You still buy groceries, you still go to work, you still complain about traffic. The difference isn't luxury. The difference is pressure. Pressure slowly disappears, and people underestimate how valuable peace of mind really is.
But now comes the part almost nobody talks about. Because above this level, money starts creating options, and options change everything. If you're still watching, subscribe and hit like because the next chapter's into the upper class and top 10% zone where money starts working harder than people do.
Something strange happens once people cross a certain wealth level. Money starts behaving differently. Below this point, money mostly solves problems. Pay rent, pay debt, pay bills, fix emergencies, survive. But above this point, money starts buying something completely different. Time, freedom, choices.
And choices quietly become the most expensive thing in the world. Because imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing you don't need your paycheck this month. You can still work, you can still build, you can still stay busy. But now it's optional. That's a different feeling. Because needing money and choosing money are two different worlds. Now Ethan's total net worth keeps climbing. $550,000, then $620,000, then higher. And notice what's changing. Years ago, his biggest asset was his car, then his house. Now, his investments begin taking over. Retirement accounts, index funds, brokerage accounts, growing quietly in the background.
And this is important because houses help build wealth, but investments accelerate wealth. A house mostly sits there. Maybe values rise, maybe values fall. But investments have movement, compounding, growth, reinvestment, time stacking on time, and that's where speed begins appearing. Now, here's something that surprises almost everyone. Many people in this bracket don't look rich. Seriously. No sports cars, no giant mansions, no designer logos everywhere, no social media lifestyle. Actually, many look incredibly ordinary.
Because people often confuse spending with wealth. They're not the same thing. A person driving a luxury SUV might be wealthy or deeply in debt. You don't know. Meanwhile, someone driving a 5-year-old sedan could have a 7-figure portfolio growing quietly. Because real wealth usually whispers, fake wealth usually screams. And social media accidentally trains people to confuse the two. Now Ethan reaches around $900,000 net worth, and suddenly something incredible starts happening. Let's say most of his portfolio earns around 7%. That's roughly $63,000 growth in a year. Pause for a second. $63,000 without additional labor, without overtime, without working weekends. Think about that psychologically. Years ago, Ethan was earning money. Now, money is earning money. And eventually, money starts earning more money than Ethan himself. That's the moment people realize wealth isn't about working forever. It's about building systems that eventually work for you.
Now, Ethan finally crosses roughly $1.7 million. Technically, he just entered the top 10%, and most people imagine fireworks here, champagne, luxury watches, huge celebrations, but reality is usually much quieter.
Because the biggest difference isn't lifestyle, it's stress. Years earlier, Ethan worried about, can I pay for this? Then, can I afford that? Now the question becomes, what do I actually want my life to look like? Completely different question. Because survival thinking disappears and design thinking begins. You stop building a life around money and start building money around your life.
But we're not finished, because there's one final twist almost nobody sees coming. Age changes everything. A 30-year-old millionaire and a 60-year-old millionaire are not standing in the same place. Same money, completely different reality.
Like, subscribe, and turn notifications on because the next chapters reveal the age shock. And honestly, this is where most people suddenly realize they're ahead or way behind. Everything we've talked about so far has one giant problem. We've been comparing everybody together. 25-year-olds, 40-year-olds, retirees, new graduates, parents, everyone in the same bucket. And honestly, that makes almost no sense because time changes everything.
Imagine two people with exactly $180,000 net worth. Same number, identical. One person is 28, the other person is 58. Same money, completely different reality. Because wealth isn't only about how much you have, it's also about how much time you still have. Time is invisible wealth. People forget that. Let's say someone is 29 with $150,000. Many people might look at that and think, not bad. Maybe average, maybe decent, nothing extraordinary, but compared to many people in their age group, they're way ahead.
Now flip it. Imagine someone is 52 with the exact same number. Suddenly, the story changes because now the runway is shorter. Less time for compounding, less time for recovery, less time for mistakes. Same dollars, different pressure. And that's why financial numbers without context can lie. Let's go back to Ethan one last time, because here's where things become powerful. Same person, same starting point, different decisions, different futures. Scenario 1. Ethan changes nothing. Minimum payments, minimum investing, lifestyle keeps expanding. Years pass.
By his 50s, maybe he's comfortable, maybe around $150,000 to $200,000. Progress? Sure, but far below his potential, because he didn't fail, because he drifted. And drifting quietly costs decades. Scenario 2, Ethan becomes intentional. Nothing extreme, no overnight millionaire strategy, no fake internet guru advice, just consistent action. Pay debt faster, invest regularly, avoid lifestyle inflation, increase income slowly, stay patient.
Now fast forward 20 years, completely different picture. $500,000, maybe $1 million, possibly more. Not because Ethan became extraordinary, because he stayed consistent. People underestimate consistency because consistency looks boring until 20 years later. Then suddenly everybody calls it genius. So let me ask you the same question we asked at the beginning. Lower class, middle class, upper class. Which one are you? When this video started, you probably already had an answer in your head. Maybe you felt ahead. Maybe you felt behind. Maybe you weren't sure. But now you have something better than feelings. You have numbers.
And if your numbers aren't where you hoped they'd be, that isn't failure. That's information. Because maps don't judge you. Mirrors don't judge you. Math doesn't judge you. Math simply tells you where you're standing. And once you know where you're standing, you can finally choose where to go.
Because wealth isn't built in one day. It's built in thousands of invisible decisions, tiny choices repeated over and over, quiet decisions nobody applauds, until one day your entire life looks different.
If you made it this far, you're already doing something most people never do. You're paying attention. So subscribe, hit like, turn notifications on, because every week we break down the real math behind money, without fake gurus, without fake motivation, and without the financial nonsense.
Your future self is watching. Don't disappoint them.